For those of you that have never been to one of these before, the City Council, sometimes at the suggestion of the mayor, sometimes at the suggestion of individual council members or the speaker, they hold hearings, they work together, they negotiate, they do exactly what democracy says they should do, and they come up with laws. Sometimes they're good, sometimes I would argue they're bad, but that's just a difference of opinion. But I've always said that what the City Council does really is what democracy calls for. They do work together, and they do read and participate, and there's none of this late at night, all of a sudden they get something that they have never read and then they're asked to vote on. This is a organization that I think works better than the federal or state governments, and not our state necessarily, but all states, and certainly the federal government. And then it comes to a hearing, which the mayor conducts, and if people want to speak, we let them speak. And then based on what they say, I decide whether I'm going to sign the bill. If I sign the bill, that's it. If I don't sign the bill, sometimes I've said after listening I'd like to go back and get a little more information. But generally speaking, even then, I've come back and signed them. And a lot of the bills, incidentally, are at the request of the administration, or certainly working with the administration. The other good thing about New York City government is the administration and the legislature generally work together. Sometimes they go in different directions. But this is as good an example of democracy, I've thought, as I've seen in government. And New York City is blessed by it. Today we have a number of bills. I will first we'll deal with two of them. There's 9 bills total. The two before us today further our successful efforts to reduce smoking in New York City. Introductory number 250A, sponsored by Speaker Quinn and Council members Gennaro, Chin, Palma, Van Bremer, Rodriguez, Rivera, Drum, Vaca, Brewer, Dickens, Crowley, Eugene, King, raises the legal age to sell tobacco products, including e-cigarettes, to 21, which will prevent young people, we think, from experimenting with tobacco when they are most likely to become addicted. Any person operating a place of business where cigarettes, tobacco products, or electronic cigarettes are sold or offered for sale will be prohibited from selling such products to anyone under the age of 21, and they will be required to post a sign in a conspicuous location stating the new law. Sales of these products should be made only to an individual who demonstrates through a driver's license or other photographic identification card issued by a government entity or educational institution that the individual is at least 21 years of age. If I were to walk in and try to buy some, and you can rest assured I will not be buying any cigarettes, would they ask me to prove my age? I can tell you at Yankee Stadium they ask everybody, including me, to prove my age, and that's their policy. Anyways, if I were carded, as they say, I would be flattered, and I wouldn't believe them. Next is introductory number 1021A, sponsored at the request of our administration by Council members Arroyo, Cabrera, Chin, Comrie, Drum, Fiddler, King, Lander, Lappin, Rodriguez, Levin, Van, Vaca, Palma, Gennaro, Koslowitz, Van Bremer, Koo, Crowley, Eugenie, and Recchia. This legislation will curb the evasion of cigarette taxes, ban the redemption of coupons and other price reduction instruments in the sale of cigarettes and tobacco products to consumers, create a price floor for a pack of cigarettes and little cigars, and require inexpensive cigars to be sold in packages of no fewer than 4. In addition, this law will allow the Department of Finance to seal the premises of those retailers who violate the law 3 times over a 3-year period. Cigarette tax evasion puts law-abiding retailers at a competitive disadvantage relative to retailers and street sellers selling untaxed cigarettes. Cigarette tax evasion also hurts the government and taxpayers. New York State's Department of Health estimated that cigarette excise tax evasion deprived the state of $500 million in 2009. And I would like to thank the Department of Health Commissioner Tom Farley, Department of Finance Commissioner Beth Goldman, Director of Health Services Andrea Cohen, Law Department Senior Counsel Andrea Fastenberg, and all of their staff, along with our Office of City Legislative Affairs, for work on these bills. I'd also like to thank the City Council for approving this legislation. People always try to put things like selling cigarettes in the context of jobs and whether or not it helps or hurts stores. I think that is just so outrageously misplaced. This isn't the issue of whether we're going to kill people. This century, 1 billion people will die from smoking around the world. And we don't want any of the people that die to be New Yorkers. That's the one thing we can do. and the people that try to change the argument to an economic one really ought to look in a mirror and be ashamed. We'll now listen to anybody speaking starting with our Commissioner of the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene.
Thank you. This is a big day. We've made great progress in smoking in New York City since 2002. Our smoking rates in adults have dropped by more than a quarter, from 21% to 15%, which amounts to 300,000 fewer smokers. And our smoking rates in teens have dropped by a half, from 19% to 8.5%. And so some might think that we've gone as far as we can go. But remember, smoking is still the #1 cause of preventable death in New York City. And smoking rates can still be far lower. A century ago, in 1910, cigarette consumption in America was 1/10 what it is today. And during that time, people haven't changed, and cigarettes haven't changed much. What has changed is the marketing of cigarettes. So you no longer see ads for cigarettes on television, but you do see promotion of smoking in movies. You do see marketing through direct mail and through the internet, and there is marketing at the point of sale in retail stores. There's advertising, there's discounting, and there are sales to youth. So these bills protect our young people from some of those point-of-sale marketing tactics. So today, New York City will be the first major city to raise the sale of cigarettes from 18 to 21. It'll protect our teenagers from getting addicted before they realize it. And since more than 80% of smokers in New York City start before age 21, this may stop them from ever starting. And the second bill prohibits the sale of cheap little cigars that get around the cigarette taxes. It prohibits price discounts that entice young people to start smoking, or smokers who are attempting to quit to buy on impulse. And it toughens penalties for retailers that evade cigarette taxes so that they unfairly compete with honest retailers. Each of these bills will save lives. Each of these bills is historic. And each of these bills will reverberate around the world. I have many people I want to thank. First, I want to thank Mayor Bloomberg, who back when he came into office said tobacco would be his #1 health priority, and he would work on it, and he has delivered. And I want to thank Speaker Quinn, who's been a great partner in everything in health during this administration, but particularly on tobacco, and has been an incredible leader on tobacco in recent years and worked very closely with the administration on these bills. And I want to thank Councilmember Jim Gennaro, who, talk about tireless advocates, who has been working on raising the legal sales age for years, and who really brought this to our attention. Then I want to thank the anti-tobacco advocates. Talk about tireless efforts. I don't see them, but I know they're in the room. American Heart Association, American Lung Association, American Cancer Society, National Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, and the Coalition for Smoke-Free New York City. And I want to thank my staff, who have worked for this day for years, and it's an enormous victory for them. So in the future, we're going to look back on today as another major advance against the world's most dangerous drug, and another giant step towards making New York City the healthiest place it can be.
Let me just point out for those of you those people that don't like us trying to inform people, we're not taking anything away, but have minimum ages for certain things and informing people about things that are bad for their health. Life expectancy in New York City is roughly 3 years greater than it was 12 years ago, and it's roughly 2.5 years greater than the national average. Just think about 8.4 million people living 3 years longer. You want to add something?
Sure, yes. I think you have the Commissioner.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Sure.
I would just like to thank the Mayor and the Mayor's Office of Legislative Affairs for working on this bill, or these bills. I'd like to recognize two people at the Department of Finance who worked tirelessly on the bill, Sheriff Edgar Domenech and John Mulligan of Legal Affairs. This has been a tremendous collaboration among various agencies, DOHMH, DCA, the Law Department, all working with the City Council. The second bill will give the sheriff and his tobacco task force important tools to help stamp out the sale of counterfeit and untaxed cigarettes. These tools should diminish the financial incentives for store owners to engage in illegal sales of cigarettes. Our tobacco task force has recently doubled in size, and under the sheriff's leadership, they will be out there inspecting and enforcing these new laws. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman?
Yeah, you bet. Okay.
Margaret, anything?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for this opportunity. You and the Commissioner covered a lot of my talking points, but I still have a few things to say. My mother, Audrey, was born in 1928 in Brooklyn, and like many New Yorkers of that era, began smoking at 18. That same phenomenon happens today, despite the mayor's great efforts over the last 12 years that have cut the youth smoking rate in half. We heard that from the Commissioner. And I would be remiss if I did not mention the mayor's very successful anti-smoking initiatives all around the world. So I think we have to give him a round of applause for what he does for us, what he does all around the world. So we've seen that the city's efforts do pay off. That's why the rate has been cut in half. And like the mayor said, the rate of smoking in New York City, both among teens and adults, is lower in New York City than the state and much lower than in the country at large. But those who do pick up this addiction will, in large measure, have their lives irreparably degraded by this addiction. They and their families and loved ones will suffer, and these smokers will harm the ones they love most with secondhand smoke. This is what happened to my mom and what happens to 440,000 Americans whose lives are tragically cut short by tobacco every year. We have to do more. We need the next big thing, and these bills are the next big thing. This law, like the mayor said, and like the health commissioner said, will be replicated, I hope, throughout the world, and the world will be better for it. Let me thank in a very special way on behalf of the council, on behalf of the people of the city, on behalf of the country and the people of the world, the mayor's great efforts to stem the tide of this tidal wave of 20th and 21st century. Start it again, okay? This tidal wave of 20th and 21st century tobacco addiction. I just made that up. That sounds pretty quotable, right? So everyone write that down, okay? This is, I don't often get a chance to, directly engage the mayor, like on a bill, but he was like willing to be personally engaged on this and talk to me, about it, and call over Tom Farley and let's run the numbers, and we should figure out what kind of benefit we're going to get from this and move it forward. And I just can't thank the mayor and his team, particularly the health commissioner. I want to give Sam Miller a shout out. Where's Sam? Sam has been a lot of emails going back and forth between me and Sam, and I think you deserve a shout out, and I really do thank you for that. Some people that haven't been thanked already that really should be thanked are my staff, council member elect Costa Constantinides, who I think is in the room. Good for you, Costa. Thanks for all this work. And this is a nice building. You're going to love working here. My staff, Paul Leonard and Bill Murray, who do very good work for me. And I want to give a special shout out to a great and small tobacco, anti-tobacco advocacy organization from Jersey, and they're called Global Advisors for Smoke-Free Policy. They're represented by Karen Blumenfeld. She's here today, and she really worked with us in a very, very constructive way for years on that. And so thank you again, Mr. Mayor. A lot of people walk around say, people say, I got to get this. They say, l'chaim, right? Like they say it. Like they say it. It means, to life. But this mayor really does something about it. And so, when he says l'chaim, he's a man who's, put everything he has into, giving more life to more people. And I think this will be. Not that it's not for me to say, but I think this will be his great legacy. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, everybody.
I can't remember how many times today I said l'chaim. We have three people who signed up to speak. Andrew Racine from Montefiore Hospital, Karen Blumenfeld from Global Advisors on Smoking Policy, and Philip Konigsberg, Queens Tobacco Control Coalition. Just if you please identify yourself to everybody, and thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I'm Dr. Racine from the Montefiore Medical Center. I'm here representing Dr. Steve Safier, who's the president and CEO, and the 20,000 associates at Montefiore. We're the largest provider of health services in the Bronx. I would just want to say that it's now been 50 years since the initial Surgeon General's report in 1964 called attention to the effects of tobacco and the tobacco effects on all of the citizens of the world and certainly of this city. We deal with that every day at Montefiore, and we're acutely aware not only of the increased information we've gotten about how bad tobacco is, but also about the effects of nicotine and its addictive possibilities in our culture. I'm also here as a pediatrician because one of the things that's less well known about tobacco exposure is that it's actually a pediatric disease. As Commissioner Farley has also pointed out, 80% or 90% of the current smokers in the United States first started smoking when they were teenagers. Every year in this country, 1.4 million teenagers pick up their first cigarette. And for the great majority of them, by the time they're 19 or 20, they're regular users of tobacco. The question is, what can we do about that? And I think there are three things. And the Commissioner has already mentioned many of them. One is messaging. And a lot of that messaging actually begins at home. It's known that if a child is growing up in a household where there's a parent smoking, they're twice as likely to start smoking as if they're growing up in a household where that's not the case. But movies, advertisements, and all other messaging that's part of our culture are a great source of behavior modification for teenagers, as everyone here knows. I also happen to be a health economist, and the second order of business in trying to prevent people from using any product is increasing its price. And so the tax policy with regard to tobacco is extremely important. Even for a substance that's known to be addictive, we are all price sensitive. And it turns out that teenagers are more price sensitive than the rest of us, probably because their budgets are a little bit more constrained. So the tax policy is a second. But the third thing, and the thing that we're here to celebrate today, is just making tobacco products less available to teenagers. Sorry, 2 more minutes. It turns out that most teenagers get their first cigarette either at home or from a peer. And if that peer is 18 or 19, they're more likely to be in contact with them than if that peer is over 21. So this is an extremely important initiative in trying to keep tobacco out of the hands of teenagers. And we know, based on activity that's in other states and in other countries, that if you increase the age, the legal age of limit when you can get tobacco, you're likely to cut down the likelihood of people smoking when they're 14 to 17 by 2/3, and when they're 18 by 1/2. Years from now, we're going to look back at the last 12 years of the Bloomberg administration as a golden age of public policy with regard to health of the citizens of this city. From the trans fat initiatives, from the calorie posting, from decreasing smoking in public places, from the increased use of bicycles, planting trees, and this initiative today, I venture to say that the Bloomberg administration has had more impact on the health of the citizens of this city than all of his predecessors combined, with the possible exception of whoever invented the sewage system in this city, and I don't know who that was.
Sewage system was done about Queen Victoria's time, and that was, I think, the biggest 1 year or one era increase in life expectancy when they separated sewage from water. The other one was about 1775 when a Frenchman noticed that babies that were delivered by nurses were dramatically healthier than babies delivered by doctors. It was in Europe, and the difference he figured out, he didn't quite know why, nobody knew about germs in those days, but the nurses took great pride in their how they looked, and so they would change uniforms and wash up after every visit to a patient, whereas the doctors went from the pathology lab to the delivery room not even bothering to wash their hands. And those two things, if you go back and look, is where you got step functions, and then better living through chemistry. You know,
So
for people that say chemistry kills you, yeah, it does, but it does it at 85 rather than at 25. So that's fine. Anything else? Thank
I
you.
just wanted to say that we're proud to be here today, and we wanted to thank you for these initiatives.
And Montefiore is a great hospital. And Pam Breyer was with us last night, someplace I was. She's at the Money's. That's
We like that.
That's
She's
okay. We like that. That's okay. Karen.
Good afternoon. Again, I'm with Global Advisors on Smoke-Free Policy, and it's been an absolute pleasure, a joy. We are very grateful to have been able to work with Councilman Gennaro on the Age of Sale 21 bill. It is a very historic day, and we thank you so much, Mayor Bloomberg, for what will be your signing soon of this very important bill that raises the age of sale to 21. Just after the bill was passed on October 30th, on November 5th, Washington, D.C., introduced a bill to do the same thing. Dubai, after your bill was passed, also their Ministry of Health passed a law that takes effect in early 2014 to ban the sale of tobacco to those under the age of 21. And we know that the County of Hawaii is considering this, as is New York State and the state of New Jersey. So all of the hard work and dedication that's taken place in this city for the years under your administration has really resonated and created that tidal wave, not only in our country, but the world. And it's incredibly powerful. And this particular bill will reduce that access of tobacco and nicotine products to those young adults. And it'll help them live healthier lives and positively impact the health of all those around them. So we thank you very much from the bottom of our hearts, our lungs, our bladders, every particular bodily part and function that is affected by tobacco. Thank you.
You're welcome. Phil?
She also wants to get a picture with you.
Yeah, sure.
He's a Queens guy.
Okay.
Excuse me. Mayor Bloomberg, I am for the passage of 250 and I forgot the number of the second one.
So have I.
Okay. But I really want to take my few seconds here to personally thank you for what you've done regarding the smoking regulations from the beginning of your office. And I've been an advocate for 25 years now, and I personally hold you and Dr. Frieden as my personal heroes. And I also want to thank Dr. Farley and for the City Council and former council member Stanley Michaels. He's here right now in the room. And Jim, you know from my testimony before, you certainly have done great things for the city, but this will be your legacy, and I do hope you continue on in your future endeavors to do what you've been doing for all this, because of you and the others that I've mentioned, I'm able to breathe a lot easier where I live, where I go to, when I went to work, when I go shopping. My whole life has been affected by you in such a positive way, and thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to mention most of those people. You should add Linda Gibbs, Deputy Mayor for all the social services, who has been an undying supporter for this. Just she's never stopped. But also the forward-thinking people in the economy. This has been one of the best things. The smoking in public places ban, where you have employees, which is the basis for our bill. It's been a godsend for the restaurant and bar business, believe it or not. They have just done so much better. I'm sure there's a handful of people that don't believe that, but almost every restaurateur or bar owner would tell you that.
I remember the Tobacco Institute coming in and saying it's going to be doomsday. Nobody would come to New York because of this. I knew that wasn't true, and certainly you've proved it. Thank you.
Anybody else like to add anything? If not, I'd be happy to sign these two bills.
Yeah, I know. I'm waiting for them to walk by.
Why don't we just give you 1 of 10 when they walk out of the room?
Nobody should leave. We'll have time for everybody. So if you don't want to find out about these next bills, leave. Or you're going to be stuck here. I'm going to lock the doors. I don't know. This is, hey, do we have 6 bills there? Okay. All right, the next 6 bills before us today are a product of the Building Resiliency Task Force, an expert panel convened after Hurricane Sandy to outline steps to fortify New York City's buildings and strengthen building standards. Their report includes 33 recommendations that address resiliency in a wide range of buildings, including commercial buildings, multifamily residences, hospitals, and 1 to 3 family homes, and offer options to help existing buildings become more resilient and strengthen the city's building code and zoning resolution to ensure future construction meets the high level of resilience. Introductory number 983A is sponsored by Council members Arroyo, Brewer, Cabrera, Chin, Comrie, Dickens, Eugenie, Ferraris, Fiddler, Gentili, Gonzalez, Jackson, James, King, Capel, Mark Viverito, Mendez, Nelson, Palma, Reina, Williams, Wills, Lappin, Rodriguez, Gennaro, Van Bremer, and Barron. This legislation sets out building and materials requirements for hospitals and healthcare facilities located in designated flood zones. Patient care areas and all spaces intended to be used by persons for sleeping purposes are to be located at or above the design flood elevation. Introductory number 990A is sponsored by Council members Ulrich, Otto, Arroyo, Cabrera, Comrie, Gentili, Gonzalez, James, Nelson, Vallone, Wills, Rodriguez, Lappin, Gennaro, Van Bremer, Recchia, Barron, Jackson, Williams, and Halloran. This legislation requires using the Federal Emergency Management Agency's flood insurance rate maps, or FIRMS as they're called, FIRMS, as the baseline standard going forward. FIRMS are the official flood maps on which FEMA has delineated areas of special flood hazard, base flood elevations, and the flood boundary and floodways. Introductory number 1085A is sponsored by Council members Chin, Brewer, Gonzalez, James, Koo, Capel, Lander, Mendez, Richard, Rose, Rodriguez, Arroyo, Mark Viverito, Barron, Van Bremer, and Williams. This legislation requires the owners of a residential dwelling where at least one unit is not occupied by the owner to post a notice in the building detailing information such as whether the building is located in a hurricane evacuation zone, address of nearest evacuation center, when a person should contact 911 and 311, and contact information of the building personnel. Introductory number 1089A is sponsored by Council members Gonzalez, Chin, Comrie, James, Koo, Landa, Mendez, Richards, Rose, Gennaro, Van Bremer, Recchia, Rodriguez, Barron, Jackson, and Williams. This legislation requires that building systems such as fuel storage, extinguishing systems, and cables be elevated above the minimum flood levels outlined in the building code in a designated flood-prone area. Fuel oil stored on the lowest story having its floor above the design flood elevation is limited to 3,000 gallons, and no storage tank may exceed the lesser of 1,500 gallons or the quantity of fuel oil needed to operate the emergency or standby generator served by the tank for 24 hours. Introductory number 1096A is sponsored by Council members Otto, Chin, Comrie, Dickens, Fidler, James, Koo, Landa, Mendez, Recchia, Richard, Rose, Gennaro, Van Bremer, Lappin, Rodriguez, Barron, Jackson, and Williams. This legislation addresses relocating and protecting building systems in flood-prone areas, sets guidelines for fire protection and alarm systems, fuel oil piping systems, and plumbing systems and components, and construction and elevation standards for fuel oil, hazardous material, and gas and oxygen storage tanks. Entry number 1099A is sponsored by Council members Richards, Chin, Koo, James, Lander, Mendez, Recchia, Rose, Barron, Van Bremer, Gennaro, Rodriguez, Jackson, and Williams. This legislation defines the different wind speeds and at what heights exterior building fixtures such as louvers, outdoor furniture, and construction equipment need to be secured and moved inside, and set standards for glass and building facades to withstand wind-borne debris. And I would like to thank the Department of Buildings Commissioner Robert Lamandry, Department of Transportation Commissioner Jeanette Sedekan, Office of Emergency Management Commissioner Joseph Bruno, Serge Manofsky, Director of the Office of Long-Term Planning and Sustainability, Daniel Zarilli, Director of Resiliency at OLTPS, and their staff, along with our Office of City Legislative Affairs for their work on these bills, and the City Council for approving this legislation. Margaret Chin is going to have something to say. Yes. You're first.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to specifically talk about 1085A, emergency preparedness. During Superstorm Sandy and its aftermath, I received questions from impacted building residents via email and Twitter on where to evacuate, when they would be able to come home. These information should have been readily available long before Sandy hit shore. This bill will begin to address this issue by requiring the Office of Emergency Management to work with other relevant city agencies to create emergency preparedness guidelines for buildings. The legislation also requires owners of residential and commercial buildings to post due notice on when a weather emergency is expected, emergency contact information, and how to obtain further emergency preparedness information from the city. As we begin to look forward to building a more resilient city, developing best practices and guidelines for preparedness is essential. This legislation will proactively engage communities to ensure that their homes and businesses are equipped to safely weather any storms or emergency. I wanted to thank Mayor, your administration for working with us, the City Council, our Speaker, and all the City Council central staff. And I especially want to thank my Legislative Director, Yume Kitase, who's here, for helping to work on this legislation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Chin. I think it bears mentioning a little bit of the backstory as to how this administration, how the city were able to move forward in the wake of Hurricane Sandy. We wouldn't have been able to. You just can't invent some kind of resiliency task force out of nothing, and this administration was able to do it like that because way before there was a Hurricane Sandy, there was an Office of Long-Term Planning and Sustainability which was created by the mayor, which gave us the visionary Plan YC. And so we were doing environmental sustainability. And then before there was a Sandy, there was a climate change adaptation high-level task force and a climate change panel of experts that were brought in, years before Sandy to figure out how we may harden the city, to what we knew was coming, these big storms and sea level rise and everything that came with. So we already had a team on the field, and it was due to the vision of Mayor Bloomberg that he knew this was coming, and that's what gave birth to the Office of Long Range Planning. And all these initiatives. And so when this happened, we were really, more prepared than I think other cities would have been. And so, the mayor certainly deserves a lot of credit for, having all these brainwaves already in place where we could, quickly get this done. And it was a great, in partnership with the council. I think this is one of this administration's and this council's finest moments, in addition to all the health stuff that we talk so glowingly about. But anyway, I just felt it was important to give some of the backstory of how we were able to have this great success. Oh, here.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm really thrilled that the mayor will be signing this legislation today that I am the prime sponsor of, which would basically adopt the FEMA flood advisory maps as the standard going forward. As many of you know, I represent the Rockaways and Howard Beach and many other communities, Broad Channel, that were devastated by Hurricane Sandy, and there are so many of my constituents who are still displaced and who desperately want to get back home or who have no home to get back to yet because they're still in the process of settling with their insurance companies. But when they rebuild their homes, they will now know at what height and level they will need to build those homes at in order to avoid a astronomical flood insurance premium. And I think that's important, giving people the information that they need and the peace of mind of knowing that when they rebuild their homes and restore their communities, that they will be more resilient and better prepared for any storm and for any damage that can be inflicted by any natural disaster again. So this is really, really important legislation that people have waited more than a year for, and we're happy that the mayor and his administration has made it a priority, and he'll be signing it today. Thank you, Mayor.
Good. Would anybody else like to add anything? If not, I'll sign the bills.
Out in front, sir. Sir, can you come out so I can see it?
ahead. Okay, we have one more. The final bill before us today is introductory number 1166A, sponsored by Council members Koslowitz, Chin, Comrie, James, Koo, Rose, Gennaro, Barron, and Williams. Introductory number 166A amends the New York City Charter to reflect technical changes made to the structure of the New York City Economic Development Corporation and sets reporting requirements in the event that EDC makes expenditures for lobbying activities for a person or organization. Last November, to ensure greater clarity in EDC's role to advance economic development activity through the city, EDC restructured its corporate form. Under the restructuring, the New York City Economic Development Corporation remained a non-for-profit corporation, and a second entity, New York City Land Development Corporation, was created to purchase and lease city-owned real property for the benefit of EDC. This corporate structure allows for EDC to continue its economic development activities while also being given the ability to advocate and promote projects before elected officials and the general public. Introductory number 1166A requires that in the event EDC makes expenditures to a person or organization to engage in lobbying before the council or other public bodies, the details of these expenditures must be included in quarterly reporting submitted to the City Council. This legislation makes a clear exemption for any expenditures made for professional services such as urban planning, scientific, technical, or legal advisement. In addition, the legislation updates the New York City Charter to reflect the changes made to EDC's corporate structure. And I'd like to thank EDC President Kyle Kimball, New York City Corporation Counsel Michael Cardozo, and his staff for the work on this bill, along with our Office of City Legislative Affairs and the City Council for approving this legislation. Margaret, would you like to add anything? I didn't think so. And I will, if anybody would like to comment on it, if not, I will sign the bill. Thank you, everyone.